So if you can turn with me to Philippians chapter 3. Just a reminder, if you haven't done that yet, we are starting a series starting next week called You Asked For It. And you can come up here just after the service, and there's some paper there. And if there's something that you would like to hear talked about or developed, or something that you're not sure about, a scripture or anything, or a topic, I'd encourage you to write it down and put it in the basket. We have 2 so far, and so we do need some more. So just keep that in mind. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for your people, for your church. And God, I just thank you for the opportunity to be part of what you're doing in this area. I pray that you be with us today. In your name, amen. Philippians chapter 3. We're in the last part of a series. This series is called Straight Out of Context. And sometimes when we read the Bible, or sometimes we've learned as a kid, sometimes we learn things that really, that maybe aren't really what we think they were. And so, Pastor Mariah talked about Jeremiah 29:11 last week. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite scripture verses in all of the Bible. And here it is. And I'll let you know when we get to it. Philippians 3. Further, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write the same things to you again, and it is a safeguard for you. Watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh. For it is we who are the circumcision, we who serve God by the Spirit, who boast in Jesus Christ, who have put no confidence in the flesh, though I myself have reasons for such confidence. So Paul's talking about, about really understanding and really understanding the importance of being humble. He said, if anyone has reason to have confidence, it's me. If someone else thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day. So then he starts to tell the reasons why he has reasons to be confident. He says, I was circumcised on the 8th day. I'm of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. In regard to the law, a Pharisee. He knew the law. As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for righteousness, based on the law, faultless. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. So all those things in the past, I consider them loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage. Now, garbage translated here is translated very kindly into the word garbage. The actual translation is much harsher than garbage. But I won't tell you what it's really harsh. And he's trying to draw this, that compared to all these good things that I achieved, it's garbage, it's trash, it's manure. So it's harsher than that. That I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but which is through faith in Christ. The righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of the resurrection and the participation in his sufferings, becoming like him to death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. Not that I've attained all this, or I've already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself to take hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind, straining towards what is ahead. This is one of my favorite lines in all the Bible. Forgetting what is behind, straining towards what is ahead. I press on toward the goal for which win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Forgetting what is behind, straining towards what is ahead. So just think about this. He's saying, listen, these are the things that man would say that I did were really good. I knew the law, I did this, I did this. He's flashbacking on these things. And a lot of people in our thoughts will think, well, Paul's saying I got to forget of what is behind me. I need to forget that I was trying to kill Christians and I was trying to do this. Forget the bad things I've done. That's not actually what he's saying. See, we have an understanding that it's important to forget the bad things that happen. Not literally forget, but to move on from the bad. Right? Because we know that if we hold on to the bad, we hold on to those things, that is going to hold us back. But Paul, in context, is actually saying, listen, forget about or don't worry about even the good things that you think are good. Because those same things that are good will hold you back if you live in the past. So out of context, it kind of seems odd. And I mention it today because people will use this verse, and I've seen it recently. It was a pastor that went through a hard time, and he fell morally. And he used this verse, I just need to forget about the past and go towards the future. And there's some truth to that, but that would be taking this passage and trying to make it something that it's not intended to mean. Paul's words, they appear to suggest that we shouldn't ever look at our own mistakes. That we just need to not worry about that and press on. But in context, Paul is reflecting on this passage. He isn't reflecting on this passage about his mistakes or on the terrible things he did when he hunted Christians down to kill them. But he's talking about his achievements, his claims to righteousness. The verse is about Paul. Paul is kind of dismantling or tearing down all the things that he could have that would make him prideful. He's saying, these things, I was a Pharisee, I did this, I did the law, I knew this, I was circumcised, I was of the right tribes and of the right people, and I have all this going for me. None of that matters. He says, basically what he's doing is he's pulling down those good things. He's not just glossing over the mistakes he did. He's pushed past those, but he's also pushing back and saying, all the good things that I've done, those are not going to hold me back. I've become convinced over the years that our biggest problems are not our failures. Our biggest problems are our successes. I mean, we have a failure and we say, okay, I can't do that again, that was wrong, and we try to push past that. But when we do something and we have success, often it takes us a lot longer to get past that. We say, if I just go back and do that again, then it's going to be okay. If I just go back and do that again, churches do this all the time. The biggest problems in churches in general isn't their failures, because if they try something and it doesn't work, they'll just stop doing it and do something else. But when they do something and it works, then they do it for 40 years, whether it worked or not. And you'll say, well, you even look at our church. There'll be things that you say, when people say, I meet with pastor friends all the time, and I say, what are some traditions in your church? And I mean, you may think this is good or bad, and that's fine. But I often will say, we don't have very many traditions. And the reason we don't have very many traditions is we only do things while they work. And when then people stop finding Jesus through those things, we stop doing them. Sometimes our biggest problem can be our successes that we had. Because then when we have success, we start to look back and we try to live off of those blessings. We try to live off of those times. He's addressing that in himself. I have lots of reasons to feel good. I was circumcised on the 8th day. I'm of the stock of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin. I'm the Hebrew of Hebrews. Concerning the law, Pharisees. Concerning zeal, I was very zealous. Paul's not looking back at the bad. He's looking back at the good. We all know that if we spend too much time in our lives looking back at the bad, that we can get stuck there. And we talk about that, and we know that that's the truth. Because if we get stuck in unforgiveness, then we can't forgive ourselves, we can't forgive others. We get stuck back in hurt, and we get stuck back in pain. And those things are real, and I'm not just dismissing them today. And the truth is that sometimes we stop growing in our relationship with God because we get stuck in our past, and we can't get past our past. I mean, we know that looking back at the bad is bad. We get stuck in guilt, stuck in regret, we get stuck in shame. And this happens whether we want to believe it or not, or want to admit it or not. This happens to all of us. We all have things that we look back at that are bad, and we say, you know what, I regret that, or I feel shame about that. But Paul is saying, I don't want to be stuck in the good, because it's nothing compared to what Christ has done for me. But whatever their gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus as my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them manure, that I may gain Christ, be found in him. You say, well, Troy, what does this look like? Just a few things. Holding on to the good things in the past, they tend to make us prideful. When I was at camp, up at camp in Northern Ontario, Silver Birches, they had this tuck shop thing where you could go in there at night and fellowship and have snacks and stuff like that. And one of the nights I was there, this man came up to me. He was an elderly man. And he walks up to me and he says, hi, and we shake hands. And he says, my name's... And he just got that out, and he turns to this picture or plaque on the wall. And he goes into this big, long monologue about, I'm the founding member, and I donated this, and I donated that, and this is my plaque, and this is this, and this is that. And he's just this long. And you could feel the pride. You could feel it. And that's what Paul is saying. Don't look back and concentrate on those good things, because they're going to hold you back from great things. God, it's even tough for God to use prideful people. Number 2, holding on to the past will derail where you're supposed to go next. Holding on to the past will derail where you're supposed to go next. My family are incredible. They're so much fun to vacation with. They are the worst 3 people to drive with. They are the worst. Like, it's not even a contest. Finally, on the way home, I said to Penny, you navigate. You tell me where to go. how to get there, when to turn right, when to turn left. But stop telling me how to drive. Please. We'd be driving. Here's the road. And just randomly, out of the middle of nowhere, stay between the two lines. As opposed to what? Like I was just going to randomly drive in the ditch because I got bored of between the lines? Just random, really strange advice. We were driving, you know how they have those shoulder things that go when you run on them? They freak out if you touch one of those. I touched it twice in 5,000 kilometers. Twice! The first time was yesterday on the way home. I touched it just real fast. Here we go again! Alex, here we go again. I was always doing this, always hitting the sides. You don't even have a license. So my lease Penny drives. She gives me advice about driving. I have a 17-year-old giving me advice about driving and a 12-year-old giving me advice about driving. When we left New York, we thought, we're going to get out, we're going to get ahead of the traffic. And we drove from New York to the state of Maine. We thought it was going to take us about 7 hours to get from New York to Bangor. We were in stop-and-go traffic. You drive 100, the speed limit. You drive 120, and then you drive 20. 120, 20. From New York City all the way to the state of Maine for 7 hours. Like, there's two people in the back seat. One's watching a movie, the other one's playing a new video game. Penny's on her phone. I'm driving. I'm the only one that has to pay attention. I'm driving. And I would be like, oh, this is so... I can't believe we've been driving in stop-and-go traffic this whole time. Dad, or Troy, or whatever they called me at that time. Like, you know what? Complaining's not going to make this go any quicker. All I said was, this is taking a really long time. And we can be like that in our travels of life. I had some close calls. I think I put them on edge a couple years ago. I had a really close call in Boston where we almost didn't come home. And I think since then they've been on edge. But holding on to something that's happened in the past will derail where you're supposed to go in the future. And you hear people all the time. They'll say, back in 1993, the Canadians won the Stanley Cup. Or back, I went on a missions trip when I was 12 or when I was 15. And continually looking back at those things, even though they're good, they can derail us. And they can stop us from going where we need to go. Because I think God would say, if I said to God, I went on a missions trip when I was 15, he'd say, Troy, you're 43. What have you done for me today? But we can get stuck back. And holding on to the past can derail us from what we're supposed to do next. God has something for each of us. People will say all the time, yeah, well, I put in my time. I can't volunteer. I did my time, like they were in jail or something. There's no retirement in the Bible. God has something for each and every one of us. But if Paul would have concentrated on those that were things that were good, he could have potentially missed those things. Number 3. Holding on to the past, even the good, stops us from growing. We need to understand that there's a difference between being planted and being stuck. There's a big difference. Plants that are planted, or people that are planted, are being watered and the sun, and they're growing. There's a process. But people who are stuck are not growing. And when we hold on to the past, even the good things, it can help us or cause us to stop growing and to miss out on what God really has for us, or the great things. Number 4, holding on to the past, even the good, keeps us wishing for something that may never happen again. And this one's tough. Because if you've gone to church for any period of time in your life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and the longer it goes, the more prone we are to this. We have experiences that we've attached to things that have happened in the past. And that's normal for all of us. But we can say, you know what, I like certain music in church. And the reason why you may like a hymn, or there's a certain song you might like, the truth is we've attached an emotion or an experience to that song. There's nothing wrong with that. For example, one of my favorite songs is a song we sang this morning, Eagle's Wings. Here I am waiting, abide in me, I pray. And the reason it's one of my favorite songs is that song, number 1, is the only song that I can play on the guitar. That's one reason. The second reason is, because it's the only song I can play on the guitar, that song has helped me through some of the darkest times of my whole life. Times when I felt like I couldn't move forward. I would go in my office or in my house, take out my guitar. And I'm not even sure why I have a guitar, because I can only play one song. But I would take out my guitar. Here I am waiting. Abide in me, I pray. Here I am longing for you. See, there's nothing wrong with attaching ourselves to those experiences. But when those experiences become our preference and we begin to worship those preferences, holding on to the good from the past keeps us wishing for something that may never happen again. If you were a Christian back in the 70s and 80s, back in the 70s and 80s, churches were filled with people. People were getting saved constantly. People's lives were being transformed. And sometimes we can find ourselves saying, I want to go back to those days of revival. You've ever heard someone say that? I want you to know that most towns, most cities, are studies say 1 to 5 generations removed from Christendom or from Christianity. The idea of revival is the idea that something was alive, it died, and then we're going to revive it, bring it back to life. Society has changed so much that many, many, many people have never, ever, ever been alive spiritually. And so for them to have an awakening is much different than somebody having an awakening or a revival in their hearts. You know what? I went to Sunday school when I was 10. I had an encounter with God at camp. Because that is not the norm anymore. There's a book called The Rise of the Nuns, and not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-E-S. And when people fill out forms, they say, you know what, what's your religious affiliation? More people than ever in history check none. They have zero religious affiliation. Now in our area, almost everyone would click Catholic. But in most areas, they have none. When I grew up, I didn't grow up in a Catholic area. When I grew up, I remember I went to church and I would ask people, what church do you go to? They say, I want to go to the Anglican church, I go to the Baptist church, or I go to this church, or I go to that church. Almost all of my friends went to church somewhere. My son today, at the same age, almost none of his friends go anywhere. The rise of the nuns. Because holding on to the past, even the good, keeps us from wishing for something that may never happen again. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a spiritual awakening. I believe there is, or I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing. But we need to understand that we need to be able to be flexible. And we need to know that church is going to have to continually change. Because culture has changed. You need to understand that the gospel never changes, but church must constantly be changing. If you're here today and you have grandchildren, okay? So if you're here and you have grandchildren, or in my case, children, our number one priority, even if it's not our preference, is to have a church and to build a church that our grandkids and our children want to attend. Nothing else matters. The problem is we have our preferences because we have emotion attached to those preferences. And that's okay. I'm still going to play my one song that I can play when I'm not feeling in good spirits. That's my thing. And it's okay if you like hymns, or you like newer songs, or you like this, or you like that. That's no problem. But we can't be people that hold on to the good, wishing for something that will never happen again. Because here's the truth, and this is hard, but church will never be like it was in the 80s. If it is, the building will be empty. The gospel never changes. Ever. But the form of how we present the gospel, that needs to change. We need to have a desire in all of our hearts to have a church, to build a church that our grandkids and our kids want to attend. I read a line this week from a guy that I know that writes. And he wrote this: if teenagers do not like your church, neither will unchurched people. Because teenagers, the millennials and Generation Z behind them, their whole thoughts and how they think is totally different than mine. Number 5, holding on to the past, even the good, will make us think that our rituals or our formulas will work. But the truth is, the rituals or the formulas of how we do things aren't what changed people's lives. Jesus does. Paul's acknowledged, listen, I've been circumcised, I knew this, I did this. But he's saying, I need to know him in the power of his resurrection. That is what changes hearts. The gospel never changes. My challenge to each of us today in closing is this: that we need to be people who learn to live in the moment. Living in the past, whether that's good or bad stuff, it keeps us stuck. Living in the future makes us anxious. So we get to New York City. We go to a hotel, we all the way down through Central Park in our car. GPS took us. We get to the hotel, we decide we're going to go into the city. So we put our stuff in our room, and the 2 families, our 4 and our friends, their 4, we all go, and we start to go get on the subway. We've lived in Bucktush for 9 years. We only have one Subway here, and it serves sandwiches. So, we go to get in the Subway, and we sit down, and there's four of us four together, those four together. And I could just see it on Noah's face. I could see the panic. And I could see the anxiety just starting to build. So I put my arm around him. I said, it's going to be okay. And he's like, I can't do this. Dad, I cannot do this. I said, we're doing it. He said, no, I can't do it. I see the tear. He said, I can't do it. He said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. Go on the subway down underground, which wasn't too bad. When we got up on the high subway, things were rocking. Like you just felt like you were going to flip right over the... And when I was trying to console him and to say, we're going to do this, I didn't go and reach back to the past and say, listen, remember this, remember that. I didn't say, listen, at the end of the day, we're going to be in the hotel, you won't be dead, everything will be fine. I didn't try to push us in the future. I said, we got to do this in this moment together. It was a long day. But when we live in the past, that keeps us stuck. But when we live in the future, even if it's just this subway is going to fall off and we're all going to die, it creates this anxiety. I believe that we need to be people who live in the now. And when we live in the now, with Christ as the most important thing, that is what can propel us into the future. My challenge for you and for me today is don't give up. And we give up in one of two ways. One way we give up is we just stay in the past, whether it's bad or good. And we say, you know what, I'm just going to live here, I'm going to camp here, this is how it is. Or we refuse to face the future. And we let our life become stuck in one of these two zones. And I believe God is saying to me and to you, live now. With the power of Christ. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the good stuff that happened before. I have better things for you. Don't give up. And I think if we could live in the moment, I think it would really change things. I just want to show us a video clip. It's an older video clip. Some of you may have seen it before. It's from an older movie. But it's a video clip of a young boy, and there's a football team, they're together. And the young boy is believing that his team's going to lose. And the coach challenges him not to worry about then. What's going to happen then. Don't think, we're so bad and worry about the past. Is that it's amazing what you can accomplish if you just live in the moment.
What's up, Coach? How strong is Westview this year? A lot stronger than we are. You already written Friday night down as a loss, bro? Well, not if I know we can beat them. Come here, bro. You too, Jeremy. What, am I in trouble now? Not yet. I want to see you do the death crawl again, except I want to see your absolute best. What, you only go to the 30? And you go to 50. 50? I can go to the 50 if nobody's on my back. Then you do it with Jeremy on your back. But even if you can, I want you to promise me you're going to do your best. All right. Your best. Okay. You going to give me your best? I'm going to give you my best. All right, one more thing. I want you to do it blindfolded. Why? Because I want you giving up at a certain point when you can go further. Here we go on the back. That was a big tight hold, Jeremy. All right, let's go, Brock. Keep your knees off the ground, just your hands and feet. There you go. A little bit left. A little left. There you go. Show me good effort. That way, Brock. You keep coming. There you go. It's a good start. A little bit left. A little bit left. There you go, Brock. Good strength. That's it, Brock. That's it. Get to 20. You give me your best. You keep going. That's it. No, don't stop, Brock. You got more in you than that.
Just rest a second.
You gotta keep moving. Let's keep moving. Let's go. Don't quit till you got nothing left. There you go. Keep moving. Keep moving. Keep moving, Brock. That's it. You keep driving. Keep your knees off the ground. Keep driving. Your very best. Your very best. Your very best. Keep moving, Brock. That's it. That's it. That's it. Keep going. Don't quit on it. Keep going. Keep driving. Keep your knees off the ground. That's it. Your very best. Don't quit on it. Your very best. Keep driving. Keep driving. There you go. There you go. That's it. You keep driving. Keep your knees off the ground. Keep driving. Don't quit till you got nothing left. Keep moving, Brock. That's it. That's it. That's it. Keep going. I want everything you got. Come on. Keep going. Hurts. Don't quit on it. Your very best. Keep driving. Keep driving. There you go. There you go.
He's heavy.
I know it's heavy.
But I was straight.
You negotiate with your buddies to find more strength, but don't you give up on me, Brock. You keep going, you hear me? You keep going, you're doing good, you keep going. You not quit on me, you keep going. I know it hurts, you keep going. You keep going. It's all hard from here. 30 more steps. You keep going, Brock. Come on. Keep going. And let it burn. It's all hard. You can keep going, Brock. Come on. Come on. Keep going. You will be your best. Your best. Don't stop. Keep going. It's not too hard. You keep going. Come on, Brock. Give me more. Give me more. Keep going. 20 more steps. 20 more. Keep going, Brock. Give me your best. Don't quit. No. Keep going. Keep going. Here we go. Don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit. Brock Kelly, you don't quit. Keep going. Keep going. Go, Brock Kelly. You don't quit on me. No, you keep going. You keep going. Go, Brock. 10 more steps. 10 more. 10 more. 10 more. Keep going. Don't quit. Give me more. No, you can. You can. 5 more. 5 more. Come on, Brock. Come on. Don't quit. Don't quit. Come on, Brock. 2 more. 1 more. Come on. Good, Brock. You're in the end zone.
If we'll be people who live in the moment, if we'll be people who live in the moment, with God as our guide, as God as our strength, not living in the past, whether that's bad or good, not worrying about the future. I mean, plan ahead and all, but not worrying about the future. I think we'll be very surprised what God can do through us. If you have your phone or a piece of paper, I'd ask you to take it out. Even if there's a pen, a piece of paper, an envelope in front of you, whatever, just grab, if you could grab something. And I want you to think, just as we sing this last song, Lord, I need you. Just as we close with this song, ask God, what is one way that I could do a better job to live in the moment. To not live in the past. To not worry about the future. But God, what's one way? And just spend just our last 2 minutes praying about that. And as He speaks it to you, I pray that you write it down. And let that be our call to action this week. To be people who don't live in the past, don't worry about the future, but do what God asks us to do in this moment. So as we sing this together, why don't you write that down as God reveals it to you, and then we'll close.